You can't do that. What do you mean I can't? How hard could it be? Boy meets girl. They fall in love. Something happens to keep them apart. True love triumphs in the end. Cash exchanges hands. She snorted. She was on a real roll. You don't have what it takes. No skill, no imagination, no experience. Plus, you have no idea what women want. Anyone could look at us and see that. If you tried to write a romance novel, it would probably turn out to be something between a comedy and a tragedy. I swear. Where do you get these goofy ideas? Hard experience made me drop the conversation, but it stuck in my brain and I couldn't shake it. The argument was sparked over a Nicholas Sparks movie. We have Netflix, and it's probably the best entertainment value around. For less than $10, you can have almost everything filmed since movies and television began at the click of a button, except for the newest movies and the current season of any series. I had watched an interview with Nicholas Sparks on my favorite TV show, Sunday Morning, on CBS. They did a brief biography and talked about the enormous amounts of money he was making off his work. The next week, Sheila pulled up one of his movies, and I told her about the interview and how much he was worth. She looked up from the TV screen. Too bad you don't have talent enough to do something like that. I bet I could do it if I wanted to bad enough. Just like that, it was on. Please, just stop. Don't embarrass yourself. I tried to let it go. You're probably right. It started early in our marriage. I had always admired woodcarvers. It was near Christmas, and I was watching a show on PBS about German woodcarvers. Their work was ornate, but they had a segment on the apprenticeship program and showed them carving simple heads. Sheila came through, on her way to shop with her sisters. She looked at the TV. They're really good, aren't they? Yes, they are. I've always thought I'd like to try it. She just rolled her eyes. You can't do that. It takes years, and I don't think you have the talent. It really irked me how dismissive she could be sometimes. I don't mean that. I mean simple things, like figures and heads. That's where they start their apprentices at. Well, good luck with that. Be back in a couple hours. She was laughing as she went out the door. I took a newspaper and spread it thickly on our dining room table, went outside and got a block of cherry wood off our woodpile, sharpened up 2 of my favorite pocket knives, and started carving. 3 hours and another block of wood, and I had a pretty decent Santa head, complete with flowing beard. I cleaned the dining room, put it on a placemat in the center of the table, and went off to do chores that always seemed to pile up. About an hour after she came home, she walked into the living room with the head in her hands. Where did this come from? I carved it while you were shopping. Do you like it? She hefted it in her hands. It has a certain, what's the word? Yeah, rustic appeal. I like it. So, where did you get it? Off the woodpile. I really did carve it. She kissed my cheek and giggled. If you say so, honey. I had to carve something in front of her before she would believe me. 10 years later, my mom needed a new deck. I showed Sheila the plans I wanted to use, and she laughed again. You don't have the skills to build something like that. Don't try it. You'll waste a bunch of money and time. I had changed jobs and worked for a modular housing manufacturer, starting out driving a forklift and rising to inventory coordinator. It was a position basically just for me. We didn't build cookie-cutter houses. Everything we built was to the plans of the customer. Of course, we had basic floor plans the customer could take and tweak until it was exactly what they wanted. We also built offices, apartment buildings, condos, anything you could plan and build in sections we did. All this customizing was expensive, especially if you ended up with leftovers. Some of the stuff was generic and could be used in another building, but a lot wasn't, and we'd be stuck with it. I could see it because I handled a lot of the materials, so I started making suggestions. They were laughed at mostly until we got a new plant manager. His biggest concern was waste, and when he saw some of my suggestions, one thing led to another until I found myself with an office instead of a forklift and a hefty raise. So, no, I didn't have the skill set I needed, but I worked every day with guys that did. And I didn't spend all those years watching without learning a few things. I hired one guy as a helper and advisor and built the deck. It didn't come together quickly, and I made a few mistakes, but when the smoke cleared, my mom had a 3-tier deck with custom railings and coordinated flower boxes. Sheila never commented on it, except to say she wanted a bigger one. I never got around to building it. Don't get me wrong here. There's a lot of things out there I can't do. I'm not an idiot. I can't fix your car or program your computer, but if I honestly think I can do it, I'll try. Of course, I had my share of failures, but I like to think I learned as much from them as I did my successes. So I decided to write a book, just to prove I could. First, I did my research. I was an avid reader. I usually read 2 to 3 books a week. Fantasies, how-to, biographies, histories, westerns, classics, pretty much everything but romances. I went to the local thrift stores and bought Harlequin romances by the bagful. Literally. They had a sale going. For $1 a bag, all you could stuff in. I also bought some Nora Roberts, 2 Nicholas Sparks, and a handful of lesser-known but also successful romance authors. The better-known writers were all right, but it wasn't my cup of tea. The mind-numbing repetitive themes in the paperbacks almost made me give up. I sat around making notes, outlining plots, character development, location ideas, until I felt like I was ready. Sheila was used to me being on the computer. We got one late in life, and I was still learning how to use it. She used it some, mostly to look up recipes and how-to sites. She had no interest in Facebook or email. I wasn't much better, so I had to get my son to set it up for me to write. I worked 2 to 4 hours, 4 or 5 days a week on the book. I redid most of it several times before I felt it was readable, then redid it one more time. It took 4 months from start to finish. When I printed it off, it was so thick, I had to bind it in sections, 3 to 4 chapters per binder. It took 5. I presented the first binder to Sheila in October. "What's this?" "It's the book you said I couldn't write. Read it and see what you think." She tossed it onto the coffee table. "I'll look at it later. There's a movie I want to finish. Do you want a pizza tonight?" I wasn't disappointed. After all these years, I was kind of used to it. She was a nurse at the local hospital. Her official title was training supervisor. Basically, she babysat new nurses, making sure they didn't kill anybody. She worked a split shift, 10 a.m. until 7 p.m., so she could work with both shifts. Every few weeks, she would work a couple of graveyard shifts, just to keep everyone in line. I worked from 7 until 5:30, 4 days a week. Unless we were behind or I had to prepare for a special project. Home almost 2 hours earlier, I made most of the meals. I like to cook, having worked in several restaurants after high school. Usually it was basic fare, but for the last year I had been a bit more creative, getting many recipes off the internet. Most times she appreciated what I made, but once in a while not. She almost never volunteered to help clean up. We were drifting apart, and nothing I said or did seemed to matter. Admitting it to myself, I saw a future as a single. At my age, it wasn't an appealing situation. Our love life had dwindled down to once every week or so. No passion, just get it over with. Romantic dinners, an occasional weekend away, nothing seemed to get to her. She blamed age, physical condition, low libido. If I didn't know any better, I'd think you're getting some on the side. She choked on her tea and went into a tirade about what an insensitive a-hole I was. But the next night she initiated a session of lovemaking. It sucked, because I knew she was just doing it to placate me, but it felt great because it had been a while. I sent her some flowers the next day, and she gave me a nice kiss when she got home. Our lovemaking picked up for a little, then she slid back to routine. I resolved to face our age, and realize it just wasn't as important to her as it was to me, and respect that. She never got around to reading the book. After 2 weeks, I took it off the coffee table, and put it with the rest of the folders and forgot about it. Our 17-year-old granddaughter was with us for a weekend. That happened about every 2 months, when their parents wanted privacy or a short trip. She actually lived with us for a year when she was 14 when her parents broke up. It just wasn't a good environment for her. The divorce was bitter, petty, and weighed along. Her father cheated, got caught, and her mom went for scorched earth instead of mediation. They argued violently about a dog neither wanted. I ended up with him. 5 months after it was over, her mother remarried. Seems she was pregnant, and had been sleeping with him long before the divorce. When this came to light, it sparked another round of fireworks. My granddaughter ended up with our son. He had recently met someone, and they seemed to be serious. Kelsey, our granddaughter, seemed to like her. Thank God for small miracles. I chewed my son and ex-daughter-in-law out for their behavior and how it had affected Kelsey, and interaction between us was pretty frosty for a while. Sheila took the daughter-in-law's side, saying she couldn't stand cheaters and treating her own son rather badly. When it came out she had played around too, I was surprised she didn't change her attitude. Her position was he must have drove her to it. I was finishing up dinner. We were grilling. Or should I say, Kelsey was finishing. That girl must have a lot of repressed male genes. She loved to grill. Whoever she picked to be her life partner was going to be one lucky individual. She chattered away about her friends at school, her boyfriend, her college plans. The bitter divorce had left both parents pretty much broke, and college was looking more and more unattainable. I stepped into the breach and offered to pay if she went the first year at the local community college. Too many of my friends had seen their kids major and party, and I wasn't going to pay that kind of money for nothing. If she did well at community college, she could transfer to any state college she wanted. I will pay the tuition, and both parents could pay room and board. Sheila and I had a pretty big confrontation over it. She wanted to keep the money to pad our retirement. In the end, I actually won. She was not a gracious loser. Kelsey sat at the computer to check her Facebook. How can they have that much to talk about? What's this? She was looking at the folders I had stored under the desk. Sheila had joined us. She laughed. That's your grandfather's version of the great American romance novel. Really, Gramps? You wrote a book? Can I read it? I laughed. Sure. At least someone should read it. Sheila stiffened. I'll read it, I promise. I've just been so busy lately. We ate the steaks and sat around talking for a couple of hours. It was her time to ride herd on the trainees on 3rd, so she had to get ready for work. I cleaned the grill while Kelsey washed the dishes. We watched a movie, and damn if it wasn't a Nicholas Sparks movie. I was off to bed and told her not to be up too late, collected my kiss, and shut the door. One of the curses of growing old is you hardly ever sleep through the night. It was 3:30 according to my clock when I woke up, needing to go. Afterwards, I checked the house to make sure Kelsey didn't leave a bunch of lights on. She was in the living room with just a reading lamp on, crying. I rushed over. Kelsey, honey, what's wrong? She leapt off the couch and hugged me as hard as she could. I was starting to panic. It's so beautiful. Did you really write this? I looked down and saw her holding a binder. Yes, baby. I wrote it. It's not a big deal, and it'll be here tomorrow. Go to bed. She did, but she took the binders. I thought about it when I lay back down and was really pleased she liked it. I thought it over and realized it was perfect for a girl that age. There was no sex in the tale. I didn't know how and didn't really feel comfortable about it. So things were implied, not described. A month went by. Our lovemaking picked up a bit, and Sheila seemed more like the woman I married. The phone rang. It was a man I went to high school with, almost 40 years ago. Pete, it's me, Jimmy Page. Remember me? Yeah, been a long time, Zep. You weren't at the last reunion. So it's been what? Almost 20 years? How's life treating you? He laughed that laugh that irritated me so much. Some things never change. We called him Zep because he had the same name as the guitar player for Led Zeppelin. First we called him Zeppelin, but of course it got shortened to Zep. Oh, I'm fine. Look, I want to talk about your book. He caught me by surprise. What book? That romance novel you wrote. It's pretty good. How did you get a copy of that? I was looking at Kelsey. She was there for an overnight. She heard the words romance novel and suddenly found something interesting in the magazine she was reading. My granddaughter showed it to me. I couldn't believe it was you. I guess you never know. I'd like to publish. I own a little publishing company. I could do you right. I never trusted Zep. Just a feeling I could never shake. I don't know. I just wrote it to prove I could. He tried for several minutes to get me to commit. It struck me he was maybe recording the conversation. Let me think about it, Zep. I'll get back to you. He was still trying to get me to commit as I was hanging up. I hit the computer as soon as I hung up, and he really did own a publishing company. But it was a vanity press. You know, they'll publish anything if you're willing to fund it. If it's any good, then they get a cut of the profits. It was a win-win for the publisher and a sucker deal for the writer. Kelsey, where's my book? Well, you see, Kelsey, stop eating waffles. Where is it? I've still got it, but I kind of made copies so my friends could read it, and they made copies for their other friends to read it, and then Angie gave a copy to her cousin on the other end of the county, so now it's going around that high school. Everybody is bugging me for your next one. Sorry, Gramps, but it's really good. You should really get it published. I tried to frown. I'm not too happy about this, but I never actually told you that it couldn't be shared. Let's just call it a learning experience. And I have no idea how to get it published, and don't really know if I should. She showed a surprising amount of maturity. You don't know how good it is, do you? Let me do some research for you. It couldn't hurt. Maybe Nicholas Sparks better be looking over his shoulder. I hugged her and we laughed, and I forgot all about it. She called me 2 weeks later. Gramps, I did it. I sent your book off to the top 4 romancy publishers on the net. All the research says that's the way to go. When it hits, you better dedicate it to me. We both laughed, and I promised I would. A week later, my computer crashed. A virus from a game site. Research taught me that game sites are the worst, followed by recipe sites, then adult movie sites. I guess more people would rather play games and eat well than watch naked bodies in unrealistic positions. The recession hit my company hard. It's too easy to pick up a foreclosure for 2/3 market value than pay the price of a new one. It got slower and slower until we were doing rotational layoffs. Sheila started complaining about me being underfoot, but there wasn't a lot I could do about it. I finally snapped. Sheila, think about this. We're both planning to retire in 4 years. You won't even have the luxury of going to work. What are you gonna do then?" "Volunteer," she said under her breath as she walked off. I was in no hurry for a new computer. I missed it, but not much. I figured someone would have a hot sale in time for Christmas, so I piddled round the house, doing things I never had time for before. It was a week I was working, and I had just got home. I was half listening when the answering machine picked up. "Mr. Smith, this is Nora Holmes with Norbert Publishing. We've been unable to reach you through your email, and we'd like to talk to you about your book. Please contact us at..." I snatched the phone up. Hello, I just walked through the door. Her tone wasn't really that friendly. "Why don't you answer your email?" "I'm sorry, my computer is down. I haven't replaced it yet." "What? How do you live without a computer? That's ridiculous. It would be in your best interest to replace it immediately, especially if you're going to do business with us." "Yes, you're probably right." "Am I? Doing business, I mean? That remains to be seen, Mr. Smith. We're interested, but it needs polish, and you need to shorten it by about 30,000 words. If you agree to work with us on it, maybe we'll offer you a contract. At the very least, it'll help you try to peddle it to the next publisher." "What do I need to do?" "Get a computer. You'll need a good one. We really don't like making phone calls, so keep up with your emails. We're sending your manuscript back. Follow directions, listen to what the editors say, and send it back to us." What an abrupt woman. She didn't say goodbye. I bought a new computer, had my son set it up. I had him establish a personal email account and password protected it. This was the one the publishers got. I wanted to surprise them all if I actually got published. When the manuscript came back, it looked like it had been dipped in red ink. I found out later most romance novels are 70 to 110,000 words. Mine had just a hair over 140. They suggested trimming it down to just over 100,000, and I tried several times, but ended up with a finished product of right outside 120. They sent it back once more before they were satisfied. I got a rare phone call. "We would like to publish your book, Mr. Smith, if we can agree on a few things. By the way, this call is recorded for legal purposes." It was one of the most interesting conversations I'd ever had. "First, Mr. Smith, it is our policy to never publish a single book. We always insist on a multi-book deal, 2 minimum. Do you think you have another in you?" Yes, I did. When this first started looking like it was real, I started thinking of other things I wanted to write. I told her I was already working on one. "Good. Send us a synopsis, and if we like it, you'll have your contract." "Excuse me, but we haven't talked about money." She laughed. "Good, you're not a sheep. Send us the synopsis, and we'll talk money." I did better. I sent her the first 6 chapters. I got a packed manila envelope 3 days later on UPS. It was from the publisher, and the first envelope inside said, "Read me first. Congratulations, Mr. Smith. We have decided to offer you a contract. It is included. Get a lawyer, have him review it. If it is satisfactory, sign and return it. The minute we receive it, we will begin the process of getting your first book published. Call me after the 1st of the year, on January 4th or 5th, after 3 o'clock my time. There's a few things we'll have to cover that I prefer not to do on the net. Until then." It was a small, 2-page contract. I went to a lawyer 2 towns over. I still wanted to keep it secret. He reviewed it, found it straightforward. It's about as simple as it gets. You do this, they do that. Breach of contract if one of you fail to fulfill your obligations. Good luck. I called on the appointed day. "Mr. Smith, good to hear from you. I just got your contract. Now, general information. It will be about 9 months before we publish. We only release a specific number of books per quarter. It reduces competition and boosts sales. As you saw in the contract, the money side is pretty simple. We never give advances. It's a straight royalty deal. You're an unknown quantity, so the first book will be priced at $4.95 per download. You get $3 per hit, we get the rest. And you have to pay taxes on your share. You'll need to get a separate bank account just for us, and we'll send you a program you can load on your computer that will automatically deduct the proper amount and send it to the IRS. There's a program you can get that does the same for your state taxes. I suggest you get it. Now, if your first book is successful enough, we'll price the second at $7.95. If you do well and want another contract, the next book will be priced at $9.95. With me so far? This part is really important, so stay with me. You mean nothing to us at this stage, so don't get cute ideas or notions of grandeur, or we'll drop you like a rock. This is a business, and the point is to make money. The more hits you get, the more money we make. If I tell you to do something, do it and don't argue. You understand? I felt like I had just been chewed out by a high school teacher. Yes, ma'am, I understand. She immediately got a little friendlier. Thank you. Now on to more pleasant things. We really like your book. It is our policy to feature 3 new writers every quarter, and you'll be one of them. We'll also release the first 3 chapters a month ahead of the published date, maybe get some orders before it's released. We're going to put it into general release and push it in our section for younger girls. The next one is a little more mature, so we'll keep it in general release. We estimate your first will be available September 1st, and we will be pushing it a month before. It is also our policy to never release 2 books by the same writer less than 6 months apart. If we didn't, you would basically be competing with yourself for readers. Now for some really good news. We're totally owned by Loveland Publishers, and they're second only to Harlequin and Romance Publishers. My best analogy is this. If we were baseball, we would be the farm system. It's our job to spot and develop talent. When you're good enough, if you're good enough, you get called up to the majors. In our case, if the amount of downloads for your books reaches a certain number, Loveland takes you. If that happens, you'll have to get an entertainment lawyer and an agent. The minimum return on a Loveland paperback is $100,000, and most do 2 to 3 times that. And that doesn't include movie rights. The right studio picks you up, and you could get paychecks with 6 zeros behind it. How does that sound? A little unreal, to be honest. I'd like to ask a few questions, if I may. How does the money end work? More importantly, how much do you think I'll make off the book? Just a ballpark figure. I could hear the smile. I keep forgetting you're not a lamb. Realistically, it's hard to tell. As I said before, we've decided we'll put you in the featured writer section. That means you'll be one of 3 that are singled out. Again, the number of hits determine your income. I feel confident yours will do well, especially in the subgroup we're pushing you in. Teen girls are extremely loyal. You'll have a fan base by the time the second book comes out, so that one should double or triple the original numbers. Only time will tell. Realistically, you may make as little as $5,000 up to more than $50,000 on your first book in a year's time. Double that for your second book. I have a woman who has been writing for me for 8 years now. She usually puts out 3 books a year and averages between $160,000 and $200,000 a year. Not a bad income, wouldn't you say? Not a bad income indeed. Before I ring off, we need to talk about your name. What's wrong with my name? She sighed. It's a man's name. 98% of romance readers are women. They identify with women. We'd like you to write under a female name. There are certain words women identify with. How does Samantha Strong sound? Wasn't there an adult actress in the 80s with the same name? What kind of message would that send? I doubt if 12 to 17-year-old girls would know that. All I'm trying to do is get the readers to buy. We argued about it and compromised by agreeing to use my first initial and let them guess. I followed her instructions to the letter. I finished the second book and was on the final editing when she gave me one of her rare phone calls. I had asked her to use my cell. I would answer quicker and was still intent on surprising Sheila. Well, Larry, you've fulfilled your contract. I think you're probably the best writer I've come across in a long time. We'd like to offer you another contract for 3 books this time, contingent on the numbers of your first novel. I was hesitant. Realistically, I didn't want to do this for a living. It was more of a hobby that I thought I could maybe make a little money out of. 3 spiral-bound notebooks on my computer desk were filled with outlines for 5 more books, so I wasn't out of ideas. I'll have to think about that. Let's wait until the first book has been out for, say, 6 months and talk again. She was shocked. Apparently nobody had ever turned her down. It took about 5 minutes before she understood I was serious. There was no friendliness in her tone when she said goodbye. The book came out on schedule. I resisted it for a week before I checked the account. There was a little over $3,000 in it, meaning at least 1,000 had been sold. In a month, 9,000 more sold. My editor called, giddy. Congratulations, your book was our top seller for a debut offering this month, and top seller overall. Judging by these figures, you may exceed 100,000 this year, before taxes. If you do, you'll be the only first-time writer to reach that mark. You may not get another contract from me. Loveland is paying attention. Remember what I said. If that happens, you'll be making some serious money. She sighed. I wish I could keep you. And a heads up, somebody from Lifetime read your book. Somebody high enough up the food chain to do something about it. We've had overtures, wanting to get in touch with your agent. Now would be a good time to get one. And that entertainment lawyer we talked about. We talked for a few more minutes, and as a gesture of gratitude, I promised to sign the 3-book contract. It would keep her standing in the organization high, and if Loveland didn't sign me, I had to fall back. Our rekindled intimacy faltered again. It got so bad she was barely civil to me. I tried to be understanding. I tried to be calm. I tried to be reasonable. But sometime after the 200th rant about something insignificant, something snapped. Sheila, do me a favor. Shut the hell up. I don't give a rat's shit on the subject, and I'm not going to debate it with you. In fact, I'm not going to debate anything with you, ever again. If you can no longer hold a civil conversation with me, stop talking. Good night. I stomped off to the bedroom and slammed the door. She never came to bed that night. I was still pissed when I got home, so I fixed something simple, something I knew she wasn't fond of, ate by myself, and put the rest up. I hope she remembered how to use the microwave. I was reading when she came in. She looked in the kitchen. I felt rather than saw her enter the living room. Are you ready to have dinner? Think you can do that without getting childish? Her attitude hadn't mellowed. When I told her I had already eaten, she stomped into the kitchen and started rattling dishes. I stuck my head in the door. When you get done, clean up after yourself. She went from red to purple to pale in the space of a minute. Before she could start, I cut her off. I meant what I said yesterday, Sheila. If it's not civil, it better not come out of your mouth. I've thought about it all day. We need some help, maybe counseling. I don't think we can get over this without it. I still love you, but you're not making it easy. Think about it. Give me a decision tomorrow. Good night. I went to bed. 3 hours later, I felt her slide into the bed, but she didn't try to touch. I got up, noticing the dirty dishes. It was a rough day at work. Vendors failed to deliver. Customers were wanting delivery early, and I was stuck explaining everything and putting out fires. I was glad to get home. Sheila wasn't home by 9. I didn't worry. Sometimes she stopped for a drink with friends, but by 11 I was worried. She didn't answer her cell. None of her friends knew where she was. I was fearing the worst when she called. Sheila, are you all right? Where are you? I'm at home, Roy. You're not making any sense, Sheila. I'm at home, and you're definitely not here. No, I'm not at your home. I'm at my new apartment. I've decided we need some time apart. My head was reeling. What? What are you doing? Trying to decide if I want to stay married to you. We don't get along anymore, and I don't know why. Maybe if we spend a little time apart we can fix it. Sheila, I don't think that's a... Good night, Roy. I'll call you in a couple of days. She hung up. I called back, and it went straight to voicemail. I was stuck. She wouldn't talk to me, and I had no idea how to find her. I looked through the house. Most of her clothes were gone. A few pictures, little knickknacks she was fond of. After a sleepless night, I called the hospital where she worked and asked for her. I finally got hold of her backup supervisor, and she told me she had taken 2 weeks vacation. So much for our trip to the Grand Canyon. I worried. I sulked. 5 days went by, and she never called. Then that night came a wave of anger so strong it scared me. Screw her. Want to play games? Okie dokie, let them begin. I called a lawyer recommended by a friend. She was supposed to be brutal. My appointment was at 4. She heard me out. What do you want? Do you want to burn her down? Scorch the earth under her feet? Or do you want something gentler, a nice split? Everybody goes their own way. Or do you want her back? It stopped me cold. I realized I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I admitted as much. She seemed to relax. All right, I propose you start like this. File for legal separation. It'll get her attention and shorten your wait if you can't get back together. This will make her realize the potential consequences of her actions and talk to you. Now, has she taken any unusual amounts of money out of your accounts? For your safety, if she hasn't, I can get the accounts froze, or you could just withdraw half and put it in separate account for now. She went on for a little longer, asking about investments, retirement plans, did we still owe on our house, things of that nature. I gave her full disclosure and was just about to leave when it hit me. Ms. Wright, I just remembered something. I have money in another account. I don't touch it, hardly think about it, but it's there. I know now that I'm a client you are bound to confidentiality, but I'm going to ask you to give me your word on this. Please don't be offended. I could tell she was, slightly, until I told her the story. She started smiling just before I got done. I can't believe it. You're R. Smith? My daughter just read your book and raved about it. I'm in the middle of it now, so don't tell me anything. So, how much money are we talking here? I finally smiled at her. I guess it would ruin your day to tell you they all turned out something else and joined the touring cast of a Broadway musical. Not really. At last count, and it changes daily, it was right at $72,000, after tax, last week. Not a fortune, but it's growing every day. Plus, in 2 months my second one comes out. Just a word of warning. I don't know how old your daughter is, but this one is much more adult. She frowned, thinking, if you divorce, you'll have to declare it, and most likely the second. I can hear the argument now. It was written while you were still married, so it's community property. Just want you know up front. It was my turn to frown. All right, she's the reason I started writing in the first place. I may sign a contract for 3 more books in the near future. What happens then? She clicked her pen. A nervous habit. My best advice? Don't sign anything until you reconcile or divorce. If you divorce and sign, then she gets none of those monies. If you reconcile, it won't matter. Now, with your permission, I'll reach out to some contacts, try to find out where she is. If I do, should I have the papers served? I hesitated, then nodded yes. The die was cast. Let the chips lay where they fall. Yada yada yada. It helped fuel the fires when I checked the accounts the next day. She had already taken half. Sheila hadn't called me 4 days later. I tried and her number was changed. Then Becky Wright called me. Found her. She's in a condo 5 blocks from the hospital she works at. Still want the papers served? Damn Skippy. And I want to be there when they are. She argued against it, and we compromised. She would tape it, and I would watch it at her office. It was actually pretty funny. They caught her as she was going to her car. She was dressed very nicely, much better than she had been the last few years with me, and was smiling. The server approached, a young girl that looked like she was still in high school. My goodness, are you Sheila Smith? She said she was with a puzzled look on her face, trying to place her. The girl smiled again. You've been served, she said, handing her the papers. Sheila's smile disappeared, replaced by wonder and then anger. That son of a witch. She grabbed her cell phone and tried to call. It was funny watching her when she found it dead. I had canceled it last night. Fuming, she got into her car and drove away. Becky Wright smiled. Well, you got her attention. Let's see what she does. But I need to bring something to your attention. You don't get a condo like that overnight. She had been planning an exit for a while. That means she'd made a decision to leave several weeks before, at least. What she did was go on about 100 rants on the phone. I didn't respond to any of them but kept them. I got a new phone and only kept that one so she would have a contact number. We hadn't had a house phone in years. She started calling me at work. I answered the first one and she started ranting. I hung up, asking the receptionist to explain to her that if she could keep a civil tongue in her head, I would be glad to talk to her. When she explained it to her the first time, she went on a rant and she hung up on her. 3 days later, she called again. In a subdued voice, she asked if I had a minute. I shut the door to my office. What do you want, Sheila? There was a few seconds of silence, then a little sob. How could you do that to me, Roy? Serve me papers? I only wanted a little space to figure out my life. I wasn't in a sympathetic mood. Poor Sheila. I'm giving you all the space you want. I filed the papers to make my life simpler. Now, either way it goes, I'm protected. Nice of you to take only half the money, makes it a lot simpler down the line. She was trying to explain. I was afraid you would get mad and keep me from it. It's my money too. Not anymore, you already got your share. I moved what was left, so don't try to go back to that well. I have to go, so tell me what you want from me. I just wanted to talk to you. Please be patient. Please. I could feel the anger rising, and I fought it. Go ahead, Sheila. Take all the time you need. If I'm still here when you want to come back, we'll try to start over. But I need to make sure you understand. This separation isn't a get-out-of-marriage free card that you can use to see others, then come back and say no harm, no foul. We were separated. If I even think there's another man involved, there's no coming back. Think about that while you find yourself. I hung up. Another 5 days went by before she called again. Why haven't you called? Well, Sheila, it has a lot to do with not having a number to call you at. All the contact point I have is the hospital, and you're still on vacation until tomorrow. I think I'll still go to the Grand Canyon. I'll send you pictures. She started crying. Why are you making this so difficult? I'm sorry I messed up our vacation, but I needed this. But now you're ruining it. I end up brooding about you. Why are you so angry? I held my breath, counting to 10. Well, let's see. My wife of 32 years turns into a screaming witch, gets mad when I've had enough, moves out while I'm at work and won't tell me where she's at, and takes half our money. On reflection, I can't fathom where the anger comes from. Sniffles. You don't have to be sarcastic. I screwed up. I admit it. Happy now? The time I wanted to take to clear my head is now so messed up I don't know what to do. Well, Sheila, I'll tell you what to do now. Hang up. I need to sleep. I'm not on vacation. She slammed the phone. Must have been on a landline. I checked my messages the next day and Norbert wanted me to call back. I went into the office and closed the door. Miss Nora, how are you this fine morning? She was nothing if not consistent. Cut the cornpone, little Abner. Where's my contract? I explained my marital woes. Great. Just ducky. Listen, you have a legal separation in place, right? Good. Check with an entertainment lawyer. But in my state, any monies that come in after a legal separation are retained by the individuals. And the contract only calls for you to write the books. We won't expect the first one for 8 months. You'll be back together or completely apart by then. I thanked her for the advice and told her to send the contract. She sounded actually human for a minute when she hung up. Sorry, Roy. I hope things work out for you. Things were getting really bad at WAC. The recession was killing us. Orders had dwindled to a standstill. The owner called us into a meeting. We're going to take a 3-week break. We're working on some things. If even one of them bears fruit, we'll have a 6-month backlog. I'm going to keep a skeleton crew, mostly maintenance, to get everything in top shape. He went on for a little while before winding down. I thought about it that night, and the next day I turned in a vacation request for 2 weeks following the layoff. The plant manager was surprised but allowed it when I told him I wanted to do a little traveling. You and Sheila have a good time? I grunted something and left. I had gotten the lawyer Norbert had recommended, but not an agent. I asked, and he said I really didn't need one right now. He did incorporate me, saying it would protect me even more in case I divorced. Not wanting Sheila to know where I was, I had him rent a house for me. It was on a lake in the mountains, a place I had loved when Sheila and I were younger. We never went there anymore. Due to the economy and the season, he got me way more house than I needed for a reasonable amount. 2 stories, with a basement, on a double lot. It was at the very tip of a small cove. 5 bedrooms, a full gym in the basement, gourmet kitchen. It even had a pontoon boat docked at the pier. I loved it. It was on the market, but no one was buying. They were happy to lease it to me for 3 months, way more than I needed it for, but at such an attractive price I couldn't refuse. The good part was my name wasn't on the lease anywhere. It was made out to my new corporation. Sheila called and left a message giving me her new number. I called her back 3 days later. Roy, where are you? I wasn't giving her any information I didn't have to. I took some time off. I think I'll try to find myself. She ignored the jab. No, I mean, where are you physically? Sheila, why does it matter? You planned to leave, leased a condo, moved your stuff, and didn't have the decency to tell your husband. When were you going to tell me where you lived? Or were you? Doesn't matter. I'm returning the courtesy. Curiosity compels me to ask, have you found any resolution? I'm working on it, Roy. Please, don't try to hurry me. I think you should take all the time you need. But just so you know, I've set a limit. If you're still gone when I reach it, the separation papers turn to divorce papers. And before you ask, I'm not telling you when it is. The shrew came back. Damn you, Roy. If you think you can buffalo me. I hung up and didn't answer the phone for a week. I settled into the house. One of the perks was a courtesy pass to the local country club with a very good golf course. I hadn't seriously played in years, but I showed up, met the management, had a couple of drinks at the bar, ate at the restaurant, and enjoyed myself tremendously. The next day I was at the pro shop, picking up a nice set of clubs and shoes. I played 27 holes, pleased to see I hadn't lost much of my game. Not that I was any good to start with, but I had a good time, playing with a few members for 18, doing the back 9 by myself. For the time of year, the course was in excellent shape. I was so sore it hurt to move the next morning. I decided to dust off the exercise equipment in the basement that afternoon. I started slowly, but in 3 weeks I was hitting them for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. I lost 15 pounds, and my golf game improved. Tired of my thinning hair, I went to a barber and had it shaved off. I grew a goatee and mustache because I had always wanted to. I was surprised when it came in. The hair was almost completely white. Sheila called me twice a week, but never said anything of consequence or offered to meet physically. She still tried to find me, even asked my lawyer. Since she didn't know exactly where I was, she could honestly say so. I forced the issue on her last call. I'm going to be home next week. I expect to see you. It doesn't need to be at the house. Pick a neutral spot we can agree on, and I'll be there. Refuse, and I turn my lawyer loose. She complained, she whined, but ultimately agreed. She picked the most expensive restaurant in town. I surprised her by agreeing. I went back to the house. It smelled empty and old. It didn't smell like a home anymore. I didn't stock the fridge. I didn't intend to be there that long. In fact, I never intended to live there again. If we got back together, it would be somewhere else, somewhere we could start new memories without the ghosts of the old ones hanging over us. She was there before I was. I almost didn't recognize her. She had dyed her hair a lighter color and lost weight. She really looked good, but as I got closer I could see hard lines on her face. The habitual frown she carried seemed deeper. It was not the face of a happy person. It pleased me that she didn't recognize me until I was almost at the table. She didn't offer a hug, didn't get up, She sat there with her mouth hanging open. Roy, my goodness, I almost didn't recognize you. When did you shave your head and grow a beard? Not that it doesn't look good on you. No, I miss you. No, I love you. Just observations about my appearance. I returned the compliment, hitting on her weight loss and hair color. She patted it self-consciously. I wanted something a little different, you know? We ordered. I had a good appetite while she just picked at her food. I ordered coffee, and while we had it I asked her if she had found herself yet. She hung her head. Not yet. Please, don't pressure me. I'm working on it. How exactly are you working on it? Long hours of self-examination? Therapy? Counseling? What are you doing to move forward? Well, I've been talking to friends, and they've been giving me advice. That's it? Are these people professionals? Any of them qualified in any field that could actually be of use to you? If all they're giving you is opinions, I'm reminded of the old saying. Opinions are like a-holes. Everybody has one and they're all full of shit. The clock is ticking, Sheila. I sat there, watching my love for her start dying as she sniffled. When I couldn't take anymore, I settled the check, wished her a good night, and left. I thought about it. She hadn't once offered to touch me, and seemed to flinch when I touched her arm. I worked a week at the end of my vacation, then was off for 2 weeks. I immediately went back to the lake house. Before I left, I talked to my lawyer. The term for the legal separation is almost up. What do you want me to do? File. Are you sure? I sighed. I'm sure. If something happens to change us, I can always stop it. And, just for the heck of it, get some investigators and watch her for a week or so. I'm curious what her brand new life is like. We talked some about my writing. My first book topped over 100,000 so far, net, the fastest ever for the site. My second came out and got 20,000 downloads the first 3 weeks, at $7.95. My writing account was doing very nicely. My entertainment lawyer was talking to Lifetime, but was getting overtures from film companies. He found himself in a small bidding war, and was pitting them against each other with understated skill. So far, it was up to 800,000. I was staggered. I thought about it for a week, quit my job, and made an offer on the lake house. Whatever Sheila and I decided, I was going to live there. Money was now no problem, although we were comfortable before. My decision was made for me when Becky called. I got the investigator's report. What does it say? I could hear the reluctance in her voice. You need to come by the office. I let the silence linger for a bit. That bad? Another silence. Yes. I'll be there tomorrow morning, if you have time for me. I'll set aside an hour. 10, all right? His name is Morgan Feldman. He's an ER doctor at her hospital. He's 61, just a little older than you. She slid me a picture. An ordinary-looking man, with a fringe of hair around an almost completely bald head. I wasn't impressed. He's married. 4 children and 5 grandchildren. His son is a doctor at the other hospital here in town. His wife is a top executive at Harmony Enterprises and travels a good bit. She has the money in the marriage. She showed me a picture of a very nice-looking woman in her middle 50s. Sheila was attractive, especially to me, but she would never be in the same class. Made me wonder. He's a serial womanizer. Your wife is just the latest. The average length of his dalliances is about 6 months, so your wife is close to her expiration date. He's very good at cheating. We put an operative on the cleaning crew at the hospital, and he snapped a few pictures as they ducked into empty rooms. I don't think they did anything past kissing. There wasn't time. Although our man got one photo of them when they thought the curtain in the room was closed. Same at the condo. They never enter together. Usually she goes out, and half an hour later he comes in. He rides 3 floors past, then comes down on another elevator. If there's anyone in the hall, he walks by. If he's clear, he lets himself in with his own key. A few minutes later she returns. He usually stays from an hour to half a day. Once overnight. They're never seen together in the hall, but we do have a shot where she opens the door after he leaves to hand him a briefcase. She looks up and down the hall, then opens her robe, giggling, and shuts the door. How did you get all this? She grinned. Money and luck. One of our operatives showed up at the condo complex, identifying himself as a representative of the security service they use, offering to audit their security system and make suggestions for improvement, purely as a courtesy. He had them call the security company, where he was directed to a man who vouched for him. He made copies of the last month and a half of security footage, and then his team examined it. The security company actually got some business out of it, making several upgrades. You've already filed. What do you want me to do now? I thought for a moment. Expedite it. Offer her a straight 50-50 split. She can have the house. I don't want to live there anymore. If she doesn't want it, we'll put it up for sale and split the money. If she fights it, tell her to get a damn good lawyer. I'll drag it out for years if I have to, bleed her dry, and tell her to expect a package from me that will explain things. She looked me over. I have to advise you against doing anything reckless or stupid. You know we can't use the condo footage, legally. I'll keep the operatives digging. Maybe they can get someone to verify the affair. I actually smiled. I don't think she expected it. All I'm going to do is send her a photo and a short message. It was the photo of her flashing her lover. I had written across it in big red letters. Time expired. I sent it to the hospital. The phone call started 3 days after she got the photo. It was reported she collapsed with it in her hands, and a few people saw it, enough to get the gossip mill going. She was off work on a 2-week medical leave. I thought she wouldn't have the nerve, but she started calling 3 and 4 times a day, sometimes more, begging me to talk to her. I snapped when I got the last message. She said it was a one-time thing. She did it because she was lonely and missing me. I actually called her back. I was on her before she got hello out of her mouth. A one-time thing? You mean one time just for that day, right? Was it just a one-time thing all the other times? The good doctor losing a step, staying power not what it used to be? Surely he knows there's pills to fix that. I had memorized the dates he had visited her, especially the night he stayed over. She was gasping and stuttering when I finished. Give it up, Sheila. You're stone cold busted. Admit it, if you weren't screwing him before you left me, you were planning on it as soon as you got settled into your love nest. She was trying to explain when I shut her down again. Give it up. I know the hospital knows about your little adventure. The only reason you both still have your jobs is there's no proof anything happened there. What do you think the chances of continued employment would be if I showed up with some photos of you playing kissy face with the good doctor in some of the empty rooms and hinted strongly about a lawsuit? To quote Bruce Willis, it would be happy trails, scumsucker. Agree to the terms, Sheila, while you still have a chance to walk away with something. 3 weeks, Sheila. Then I go to the hospital and afterwards have a little show and tell with Mrs. Dr. Feldman. Up to you. And don't call me again. Call my lawyer. Goodbye, Sheila. I hope you have a horrible, empty, loveless rest of your life. Okay, the last was a bit over the top, but I was in a lot of pain. I turned my old cell phone off and put it in a drawer. My offer was accepted on the lake house. I was now a full-time writer with a mortgage. I had finished the first draft of my 3rd novel and got a call from Miss Nora. This one isn't up to the standard the other 2 set, but it's readable, and we have a few months to polish it. Divorced yet? I'm working on it. Well, sorry, and I do mean that. I've got something I need you to think about. Your books are really good, but kind of tame. Ever heard of erotica? 50 Shades of Grey ring any bells? Only in general terms. You'd have to be living under a rock not to hear about that book. Where are you going with this? Erotica is really hot right now. Sex sells, baby. Remember that saying? It's a fact, and if you can write it well, you can make a lot of money. I was joking when I said, Miss Nora, for the right amount of money, I'll write something so hot it'll melt you off right at your desk. It was the first time I ever heard her truly laugh. You do that, Roy, and we'll both make a load of money. I've sent you 4 sites I want you go to. They're for amateur writers of erotica. Go on them. Read a few stories, get a feel for it. Write a few. It'll be good practice. Just a word of caution. Many on these sites are decent writers, and a very few are outstanding. But most of the stories are like reading an adult movie, with no character development. If you can't get your readers invested in the characters, they're not going to read your stories, and more importantly, if they do, they won't remember them. Most have a rating system of some kind. My advice is to read only the top 20%. Email me when you post yours, and I'll read them. Anyone could be the nucleus for your next book. I did go on the sites, picking what I thought was the best. I read them for a week before attempting a story. It was only moderately successful, but future postings were better received as I came to grips with the short story format. I often did them when I was stuck on a particular passage in my regular books. They helped clear my head, enabling me to concentrate better. The 3 weeks passed and Becky called me. She wants a face-to-face, and she wants you to go to counseling together. If you agree, I'll get the number of sessions set as low as possible. It'll look good if we have to go to court. Speaking of that, I'm going to propose a trade. You talk, go to counseling, and if you still want a divorce, we skip court and go directly to arbitration. I recommend it. It's cheaper, doesn't take as long, and if you agree to it, you have to accept the decision of the arbitrator and can't challenge it in court. It's also usually a lot less bloody. They do a really good job not letting things get out of hand. Just so you know, nobody wins at arbitration, just like if we were to go to court. Both of you will lose some things, win others, but in the end, it'll be a deal you can both live with. Are you game? I thought about it for a minute. Is this the quickest way? No, Roy, it's not. But it's the best and usually the cheapest. I recommend it. Where do you fit in, Becky? Once you agree to arbitration, I'm basically out, unless you want me to advise you on an informal basis. All right, do it. But I still consider you my lawyer, and I will seek your opinion. She laughed and thanked me. It really is the best way, Roy, and I'll still be glad to send you a bill from time to time. How's the writing? I told her my third was finished, about the negotiations for the movie rights to the first one, and my little adventure in erotica, giving her the site and my pen name. I don't know if that sort of thing offends you, but if it doesn't, read a few and tell me what you think. Set the meeting. Are you ready? I looked over at my lawyer, remembering again how much she looked like my freshman science teacher. I told her that once and I think she didn't like it, until I told her she was the hottest teacher in school. She perked up after that. We were in her conference room. I was pacing while she sat on the table swinging one long stockinged leg, her 3-inch heel dangling from her toe. I grinned. She noticed. What was that about? She sat on the conference table, swinging her long, stockinged leg, shoe dangling. A seductress, hidden in a business suit, waiting to pounce on her next victim. Does she do it on purpose? Or does all that suppressed sexuality demand release at odd and inopportune times? How does sound as a passage in one of my stories? She blushed a little and grinned wickedly. She was 43, looked 33, and acted 25 when she wasn't working. We had developed an easy friendship over the last few months. You better make her prettier than me. My prose isn't that good. Impossible, you know, to improve on perfection. Becky dear. She actually blushed again. You're a dirty old man disguised as a writer. I've become many things over the past months. An admirer of beauty, for instance. Stop it. It's gonna be hard enough to keep a straight face as it is. Behave. And remember, watch me. If I don't like what you're saying, I'll give you a head shake. Her assistant opened the door. They've arrived. I put on the coffee. Water will be in the bar fridge. Becky looked at me. Ready? As I'll ever be. Showtime. Sheila didn't look so hot. She had gained the weight she'd lost back since I had seen her last, plus a few pounds. Her hair was pulled back with a band, not a good look for her. I had no idea how I looked to her. I had grown my mustaches and goatee out until I looked like a shaven-headed Buffalo Bill. I liked it, and one thing about having money, even a little, is that most times you only have to impress yourself. I was leaner than she saw me last, in better shape. Golf and my home gym took care of that. I looked at her and tried to remember the hot co-ed I had bedded in college. Her hair down past her waist, her body, willing and eager to make love, anytime, almost anywhere. I had showed Kelsey a photo I had of her then, wearing cutoffs and a thin halter top, smiling that killer smile as her hair swirled in the wind. I think it was the first time she realized we weren't born old. Gramps, she was hot. I totally agreed. What really threw her was a picture of me. She looked at it and asked who it was. I had on a tidy t-shirt, bell-bottoms with a huge flare, had a beard, wire-rimmed glasses and hair past my shoulders. I laughed. It was the early 70s, baby. Look it up. I was pretty average back then. She took both pictures home with her. I smiled at the thought of her then and she misread it, thinking it was for her now. She smiled back. I put my serious face on, determined to get this over with. She looked apprehensive and nervous again. Becky thanked them for coming, offering them water or coffee. I waited until they were seated, then took a seat opposite. Becky cleared her throat. If you're ready, we'll discuss the settlement agreement first. Sheila spoke up before her lawyer could stop her. I don't want a settlement. I want my husband back. I shocked them all, I think, when I asked her, why? Why do you want me back now, after you made our last 2 years hell, left like a thief in the night, hid from me, took half our money, also you could screw another man. You said you were looking for yourself. Tell me, Sheila, did you find yourself? Has he left you yet? Did you hit your expiration date? If you like, I can show you my investigator's report. You weren't the first nurse to keep the lonely doctor company while his wife traveled. She sobbed and Becky shushed me. You're not helping things, Roy. I thought I could control my temper but couldn't. I'm not here to help. I'm here to end things so I can go on with my life. I'm sure Sheila wants to get on with finding herself. This should help her. We took a break and she took me out in the hall and ate me up. Her finger was in my face. Another outburst like that, and you'll need new representation. Now, promise me you'll stick to the game plan. I apologized and we went back in. Sheila tried to get everyone back on track. Mrs. Smith, I'm very sorry, but your husband just does not want to continue this marriage. He's a fair man and really doesn't want you to suffer. We all make mistakes and have to live with them. He's willing to split all assets evenly and is also willing to give you the house if you wish it. Is there anything in particular you want? Sheila had managed to remain calm. I want my life back. I know I threw it away, but I'm willing to walk through the fires of hell if that's what it takes. I'll quit my job, never leave the house, bow and scrape if I have to. Nobody spoke for a second. I drew in a breath, but Becky put her hand over mine. Sheila saw it, and her eyes narrowed. To rub it, and I took her hand and squeezed it, holding it for a few seconds. Becky caught on and snatched her hand away, frowning. I wasn't helping myself. Her lawyer spoke for the first time. The whole reason we agreed to this sit-down was for my client to have a 30-minute conversation with her husband. She freely admits her affair and lack of reasonable behavior, but there were extenuating circumstances. If she isn't going to be allowed that chance, we'll leave, counselor, and see you in court. Becky became placating again. My client will honor this agreement if you honor yours. In this envelope is full disclosure of my client's finances. I think yours will be surprised. Also, the conversation will be recorded, and we will each take a tape immediately after. Agreed? He didn't like it, but it was in the agreement. They left, placing 2 cassette recorders on the table. Becky pulled a timer out of the sideboard and handed it to me. I set it for 30 minutes and started it as soon as the door closed. She didn't say anything for a few minutes. Sheila, you've already wasted close to 3 minutes. If you've got something to say, better start soon. She spent 5 minutes crying, 5 minutes explaining, 5 minutes apologizing, 5 minutes begging. I answered when I thought it was appropriate. In the end, she was exhausted and I stood firm. You know what you haven't said? I'll never do anything like that again. Not in those exact words. And that's what it's gonna take. Know why? Because you can't. Our lawyers don't know our history. So, until you can tell me that and I can look in your eyes and believe it, there's never going to be a chance we'll get back together. Please, Sheila, we had a good run. Let it go so we can both move on. Please, Roy, you can't do that. Try, please. The meeting was pretty much over then. After Becky stopped chewing me out, I kissed her soundly, apologized sincerely, and invited her and her husband up to the house for the weekend. The lawyer stood, with emotion, as her enigmatic client strode from the room regretfully, knowing the hot vixen would never be his. Damn morals, he thought. I didn't get to finish the thought as a law book slammed into the wall beside the door, followed by the laughter of Becky and her assistant. I better get royalties, she yelled after me. We had become friends over the months. She and her husband were both in their early 40s with a teen daughter. I had them up to the house twice before. Seems her husband Jack was an avid fisherman, and when I mentioned the pontoon boat came with the house, he almost salivated. We spent a pleasant morning working the coves, while Becky, her daughter, and Kelsey and a few of her friends sunned. I finally told Kelsey what her determined actions had resulted in after picking her up from school. She was stunned and thrilled alternately, both at the money and the house. She wandered through it, looking at everything. When she saw the patio layout with the outdoor kitchen, she was speechless. I took her down to the little independent grocery and she watched, thrilled, as a butcher cut meat to her exact specifications. We stopped at a produce stand and bought fresh vegetables to use for sides. After our feast, we sat and talked about her future. Her grades in community college were near perfect. You know, Kelsey, I can afford to send you anywhere you want to go. You get a car and spending money as long as you maintain your grades. Think about it, look around, do what's best for Kelsey. She cried herself to sleep. I gave up trying to get her to stop, got a blanket and wrapped it around her to ward off the coolness of the evening, and left her. She stayed with me a week before she went home, swearing not to let anyone know where I was or what I was doing. She was disappointed that her grandmother and I weren't together. She spent the night with her now and then, said she was sad all the time. I never commented. I was a regular at the country club. I made friends, played golf if it was weather fit 2 or 3 times a week, and socialized. I ate at the restaurant twice a week on average. I knew the guys at the grocery store, the names of the guys that ran the gas station I used, and a couple of farmers I met while buying produce. I was integrating, becoming part of the community. I was just Roy, the retired guy that bought the Kessler house. When I quit, my health insurance stopped, so I used the agent that sold me homeowners and car insurance to set me up with a family policy. I included my son, Kelsey, my ex-daughter-in-law, and Sheila, telling them I got a good rate if I used the family plan. They all bought the story, not wanting to look a gift horse in the mouth. I redid my 3rd book completely, making it a much better read. Miss Nora wasn't surprised when Loveland came calling. Out of loyalty, I made sure she got to publish the book online, dedicating it to her. I don't know if she appreciated it or not. She was the most unemotional woman I had ever met. I did find out she won some kind of award and got a nice promotion later. I like to think I contributed to her success. Sheila and her lawyer got cute, trying to renege on their promise to go to arbitration instead of court. I was set to burn her down, make her lose her job, but Becky stopped me. So she loses her job. Whoopee. It'll make you feel good for what, 5 minutes? Then you'll be divorcing an unemployed housewife instead of a well-paid professional. It'll cost you more than the satisfaction you'll get, paying her alimony. Let's hope she doesn't figure it out and quit for spite. If you lose sight of what you're after, resolution over revenge, it'll get long, costly, and more painful. So I left her alone. But the rumor mill continued to grind, kept alive by her pending divorce. Eventually, it got to the point where management had to address it. They gave her and Dr. Feldman a week of paid leave while they considered what to do. Word got out they were going to fire her and give the good doctor a slap on the wrist. Her lawyer called Becky. Becky called me. Sheila's attorney, and I paid a little unannounced visit to the director. Becky told him flat out if she was fired, lawsuits would descend like an avalanche. We have 3 affidavits from nurses he had affairs with before Mrs. Smith, evidence he was the aggressor in the relationships, and that inappropriate contact occurred in the workplace. Our clients are determined to file suit if Mrs. Smith is adversely affected. Think of the damage to the image your hospital projects. We intend to name and sue you separately as director for allowing this kind of behavior to occur despite hospital policy. She paused for breath as his eyes got bigger. Or, we could all just go away and let it go, provided Mrs. Smith is treated with respect. But you still might want to do something about Dr. Feldman before he lands you in a situation that can't be dealt with privately. In the end, to allow them to get rid of Dr. Feldman, they had to demote her. She agreed and became a regular shift nurse. Mrs. Dr. Feldman finally got tired of her husband and transferred to the West Coast to head their operations there. It was a huge promotion, and since she provided the money for their lifestyle, he went from a $3 million estate to a 1-bedroom townhouse. He lost his privileges at his old hospital and just barely, thanks to his son, got them at the other hospital in town after agreeing to a probationary period. So now his life semi-sucked. Was I happy about it? Yes, in a way. He deserved it for being a predatory a-hole. That being said, my wife was an intelligent woman who could have said no at any time during the seduction. If it hadn't been him, it would have been somebody else. In the end, I agreed to 3 months of marriage counseling, meeting twice weekly and once individually, after it was made ironclad that after that, if I still wanted the divorce, it would be granted. My therapist didn't like me much. Her name was Dr. Patricia Wills. Her reconciliation rate was a source of great satisfaction to her. She was always smiling, emphatic, and just as irritating as possible. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Roy. I like to keep things informal. So? I held up my hand. You can stop right there, Patricia, Patty, Trisha, Trish, whatever you go by. You will address me as Mr. Smith. I will address you as Dr. Wills. This is a business arrangement. We're not friends meeting for drinks after work. Keep it professional, and this will pass much faster for us. She eyed me critically. That's going to make it harder to establish a rapport. It appears to me you don't want to be here. I can go back to the court and... I stopped her again. Dr. Wills, you're not being professional. Have you even read the agreement between my wife and I? These sessions aren't court-ordered, but I did sign a contract agreeing to meet with you for the specified time. Whether I participate, despite what you may recommend, it ends at the agreed-upon time. And if I still want the divorce, it becomes automatic. And my lawyer worded the contract very carefully. It says I'm obligated to attend, not participate. That being said, I'm curious about some things, so I most likely will participate. Understand, this is important. You have no power over me. You have the same standing my butcher or mechanic at home have. You're a professional I'm using for a specific task. All right. I used up most of my first session establishing my ground rules. She was not happy. I have no idea what her sessions with Sheila was like. Our first 2 joint sessions were pretty tame, mostly her apologizing. I told the doctor if we didn't get past that I was going to bring a book or tablet to the rest of the sessions. My next individual session, she changed gears, having me tell how we fell in love. It was 1972, and I was 18 years old, barely missing the messiness and destruction of Southeast Asia. I had gotten an academic scholarship to study business. I was always a bit of a wild child, raised in a single-family home after my dad was killed in a car crash. We didn't get much insurance, so Mom worked long hours in a furniture factory to pay the bills. As soon as I turned 16, I got a job in the same factory, working 4 hours a night Monday through Thursday, 8 hours Friday night, and coming in at 6 in the morning on Saturday to work 6 more. After I had been there a while, my boss would let me work an extra hour here and there and full shifts if school was out. So I was basically working 40 hours a week and attending high school at the same time. High school was easy for me, mostly. Loved English, history, and science. Wasn't so great at math. When I started working, I footed my own bills and took a lot of the burden off mom. I bought my own car, clothes, even paid for groceries a lot of times. When you work the hours I did, there wasn't a whole lot of time to spend money. I dated a lot on Saturday nights, but it didn't go anywhere because teen girls like their boys to talk to them on the phone, go to school events and games during the week, and generally be available. I wasn't. The scholarship came from the company I worked for. I saw a notice on the bulletin board urging workers to have their children apply. My boss saw me looking at it. "Got any kids college age?" He said with a grin. "No, but does it have to be a child? Can it be an employee?" He looked at me like it was something no one had ever thought of. I don't see why not. I forgot about it. But 3 days later, the plant manager stopped by on his way home and gave me some papers. "What are these?" "Your scholarship application. Bill said you were interested. It's self-explanatory. Just get your teachers to fill out their part quickly. The faster you get it back, the more time we have to consider you." I didn't think I had a chance in hell, but my teachers helped me out, and I had a good interview with the screening committee. I was still surprised when I got it. Mom was over the moon. Her son, a college man, she showed me a savings account she had started when I was 4, just for college. She got to keep most of the money. They paid for everything and got me a part-time job at their local plant. The hours I got to work were tied to my grade average. The higher the average, the more hours I could work. If they dropped, I was practically unemployed. I averaged 24 hours. She did insist on buying me a better car. Like I said, it was 1972, the tail end of the muscle car era. Camaros, Mustangs, GTOs, Chevelles were all popular. My car was a little different. I had a 1969 Dodge Polara, called the 4-door Roadrunner. It was built for and sold specifically to law enforcement agencies. I got mine at a state auction where they were auctioning off old patrol cars. It wasn't painted as a cop car, being called an unmarked. It had a 383 Interceptor engine with a stock 4-barrel carb, do 0 to 60 in just over 6 seconds, and be close to 100 in a quarter mile. The specially calibrated TorqueFlite automatic transmission was designed to stand up to the high horsepower and torque. It had heavy-duty suspension and radials tires, in a time when they were just getting popular. At first glance, it looked like the kind of full-size 4-door car your grandfather would drive. There wasn't a lot I couldn't bust going from stoplight to stoplight. We were in the next town over, cruising the burger joints, checking out girls. Billy was complaining we should have taken his Mustang when a Chevelle pulled up beside us. The guy had 3 girls with him. It had glass packs and he was revving his engine, laughing. "Grandpa know you got his car out?" I just smiled, pulled a 20 out of my pocket, held it up, popped it twice so he could see the denomination, and laid it on the dash. $20 was serious cash back then, especially to a college student. He was so surprised that when the stoplight changed he missed it, and I pulled sedately away. We could hear the girls laughing. He pulled up beside me again. His pride hurt. "You're on!" he yelled, putting a 20 on his dash, roaring and popping. He didn't have a chance. When the light changed and I put my foot in that 4-barrel, we were gone. He was fishtailing while my stabilizer bars kept me right on track. We pulled over in a grocery store parking lot. I can't believe it. What the hell is this thing? Soon we had the hoods of both popped, swapping stories. It worked out pretty well. He had 2 extra girls and I had 1 extra guy. It was a warm evening at the beginning of summer. Everybody had their windows down, radio blasting. I was into the cars and didn't pay much attention at first. He was trying to talk me into going to another location, doing the same thing we had done, running me in as a ringer and cleaning up on side bets. Billy was urging me on. He had an eye for the short blonde in the back seat. "Come on, I'll ride with him. The other girl can ride with you. Maybe we'll get a little out of the deal." I was laughing, saying I bet she was a dog, when the brunette finally got out of the car. She was trying to untangle her mass of waist-length, curly hair and pull it back. She got her hair in order and looked at me. "Hi," she said, grinning and extending her hand. "I'm Sheila." Woof. Shit. A stone-cold fox had just heard me say she was probably a dog. I went bright red and stuttered while everyone else fell back laughing. She accepted my apology, let me buy her a bottle of wine, and was in the front seat for the rest of the night. The girls were nursing students at our college, which explained why our paths didn't cross before. Billy did indeed get something that night, but I didn't. By the time we got back to the apartment they shared with 2 others, she was passed out. I got to carry her in and put her on the couch. I didn't even get a kiss. The next day she was at my apartment, holding her head. I didn't see anyone else. How did you know where I lived? How did you get here? Still holding her head, she walked by me and lay down on the couch. Sabrina dropped me when she brought Billy home. I felt bad, passing out on you last night. I came by to see if you were as cute sober. Can I have some water and a few aspirin? I got it for her, darkened the shades, and she lay back. She promptly fell asleep. She slept for 3 hours and woke up with a start. Where the hell am I? I had been in the kitchen, studying. You're at my house. Remember me? Sabrina brought you over just before noon. Apparently you needed a little more sleep. She went bright red, then giggled. Well, I guess that'll teach you not to let me drink 2 bottles of wine. I'm hungry. She used the bathroom, neatened up a bit, and we went to a little place close by. She looked at me. I don't think a greasy burger or pizza would go over too well. That and sandwiches are the extent of my culinary skills. The place was quietly famous for their homemade soups and breads. According to what type soup you ordered, sometimes the loaf was the bowl. It was filling, good, and fairly cheap. She had never been there. Feeling human again, we went to the park and hung out, talking to each other and whatever friends happened by. A couple guys she knew came by with guitars, and we sat around and sang. She had a good voice. It's one of my better memories. I asked her if she was ready to go home, and she said she'd like to go back to my place for a while. I had no problem. She made me stop at a store and came back with a 12-pack and some chips. We drank 2 beers when she went into the bathroom. I was surprised when I heard the shower running, even more surprised when she called out to me. But I was most surprised when she opened the door and stood there naked. We need towels, she said in a calm voice. She turned and walked back towards the shower. I was dumbstruck, watching that incredibly cute body sway back and forth. She looked over her shoulder and grinned. You coming or what? It definitely wasn't what. She was the type of woman who inspired so many goofy love songs of that era. We were young, enthusiastic, and soon, in love. It was almost the end of our freshman year, and she lived with me the last 4 weeks. It was hard on us that first summer, being apart. I stayed in town and worked in the factory. Since Sheila wasn't around, I worked massive amounts of overtime. She had already lined up a job at a rest home near her parents to gain nursing experience. She hated it. She came back 2 weeks early to surprise me. I came in from work and she was sitting on the couch naked. I didn't want to waste time, she said, as she dragged me to the shower. I didn't work any more overtime. She moved in, not even pretending to live with her friends. Her parents didn't like it when they found out, but by then most of the year was gone. We lived together all the way through college and a year beyond. It all fell apart in late 1977. I had an entry-level job at a new company. It wasn't really what I wanted, but it would look good on a resume. I worked hard, putting in extra hours, trying to make a good impression. She had a job at the local hospital, general duties mostly, although she liked to work in the birthing rooms and with children. We were in a nice apartment, and she insisted on splitting the bills, minus car payments, so I was saving a good bit, looking to the future. Sooner or later we would want kids, and I wanted a nice place to raise them. Then she suddenly changed to night shift. She said she didn't have a lot of choice. I hated it. We had the evenings together, and that was all the contact we had until the weekend. She left at 10, and I was gone when she got home. I didn't have any experience with that sort of things, but the signs were there. Moodiness, disrespect. Sometimes she wouldn't be home when I called on my first break. She said she was asleep. A reasonable explanation. But I knew she couldn't go home and go straight to sleep. It usually took her 2 or 3 hours to wind down. It came to a head when I proposed. She was shocked. She didn't say no, exactly, but she didn't say yes. Why rush? We're in love, that's not going away. We have plenty of time. We're not rushing, Sheila. We've been together 5 years. It's time to move to the next phase of our life. Don't you want kids? She fidgeted. Yes, of course I do. But we have plenty of time. We're still young. Let's enjoy each other a bit longer. I thought for a second. Let me get this straight in my mind. You say we'll marry, but not right now. We'll have kids, someday, on your schedule. Where is this coming from? Sounds like you have doubts about spending the rest of our lives together. Anything else on your mind I need to know about? She burst into tears and hid in the bedroom. Things went downhill pretty fast. I came home a month later to find her moved out. She left a letter. Dear Roy, please don't be mad. I've been feeling restless lately, like I'm missing something. I've talked to my friends, and I've decided I need a little space. I need to find myself before I can commit to a lifelong relationship. I still love you. Please, give me this time. I'll be back before you know it. I was heartbroken. Then I was angry. We still had a lot of friends in common, and soon word got back to me. She was finding herself with the help of one of the doctors she worked with. She would call me, and I would hang up. I know, childish. I didn't care. She saw me at a club and was pissed beyond words I was there with a date. She was with friends, and they tried to keep us apart, which was fine by me. My new girlfriend saw the stares and I filled her in without going into the detail. She was a little redhead, with a temper of her own. Want a little payback? Of course I did. She hung on to me like I was the last drink of water in a desert, and I let her. People didn't bump and grind back then like they do now, so it got a lot of attention when we slow danced, and she practically dry humped me on the dance floor. That tore it with Sheila. She charged over with a full head of steam. What the hell do you think you're doing? I'm going through issues, and you're running around with 304s. That's not how it works. You can't do that. How's that helping us get back together? It was a golden opportunity, and I was young and petty enough to take it. Who said we're getting back together? I love you for 5 years, and suddenly it's not enough? Have you found yourself yet? I bet if you look hard enough at the end of Dr. Love's, you'll at least see part of you. Didn't know I knew about that, did you? Now leave me alone. I tell you to go get screwed, but you already did. She went pale and collapsed. I left and didn't see her again for 2 years. When I say left, I mean left town. I got a better job offer in another state and took it. I didn't tell anybody until the day before I left. I had a big party and invited my oldest friends. They were shocked when I told them it was my farewell party. Late in the evening, Sabrina and Billy got me alone. What did Sheila say when you told her? I was surprised. I haven't seen or talked to her in almost 2 months. Why should it matter? Sabrina snorted. I admit it. She was a witch. How she left you was bad, and screwing that doctor was even worse. But since that night at the club, all she does when she isn't working is sit around and mope about you. She made a mistake, screwed up bad. I know for a fact she would do anything for a chance to start over with you. Can't you at least say bye? I shook my head. Already said bye. Tell her this though. Stop moping around. Put a little energy into the relationship with Doctor, she'll be happier. She almost slapped me, but I caught her hand. She hasn't seen him since the night she saw you with that redhead. Besides, he's married. There was never a future there. That tidbit just pissed me off more. So she was screwing the guy knowing he was married. That solidifies her standing as a certified 304 in my mind. I'm sorry, Sabrina. There's nothing left anymore. I wasn't taking anything but clothes with me and made a deal with a few college guys to take what they wanted, as long as they cleaned the place out and left it good order. Billy supervised. He said I hadn't been gone 5 minutes when Sabrina came by with Sheila. She saw the stuff piled outside and threw a fit, screaming, grabbing things and trying to take them back inside. They finally got her calmed down. I had left everything that was hers, or that I thought she might want with Billy anyway, so she had nothing to complain about. She sat there and cried while the physical remnants of our life together disappeared. I finished our saga in a joint session. So you see, Dr. Wills, there was a precedent for her recent behavior. And it makes me wonder, in between then and now, had she gotten lost again? Was I living in a fool's paradise while she found herself with other doctors? Looking back, I can remember a few rough patches. Sheila denied that violently, but wouldn't look me in the eye. And apparently, her version of our history had been revised a bit to put her in a better light. Dr. Wills was not happy. In my next individual session, she asked me how we got back together. I was doing well in my new job. It looked like I might have a future there. I took 2 weeks vacation and went home to see my mother. She had remarried, a decent guy. We had nothing in common except love for my mother, but it was enough for us to become friends. I spent 4 days with him and enjoyed it tremendously. My old college town was between my new town and my old one. I had stopped for gas and went to see if the little cafe that served such great soup was still there. It was. I had just started eating when someone slapped me on the back of my head. I looked around and found Billy and Sabrina. That's for not keeping in touch, a-hole, said Sabrina, as they sat down. We caught up. They had married, and had just found out they were going to be parents. Their joy had me smiling. We talked for a bit, and they asked if I was going to be in town for any length of time. No, I'm on my vacation, passing through on the way to visit my mom. But I'll be back this way at the end of the week. Maybe we can get together then. I called as soon as I got back into town and checked in. We met with a few old friends that night, with a promise to get back together the next day. Billy and Sabrina had a nice home. 3 bedrooms, with a large yard. It was a little older, but they loved it. They had tables set up, party lights strung through the trees, the stereo pulled outside and hooked to extra speakers, and 3 grills going. There was about 40 people there, old classmates and their spouses or partners of the moment. I knew almost everybody, and eventually we did the marriage count. All but me and 2 others were married. 2 had married and already gotten divorced. So, is there a Mrs. Roy in the near future? It was an innocent question, but one that still brought me pain while I looked at my old friends. No prospects at this time. I see a few, but nothing serious. To be honest, I haven't been looking. You know how my last serious relationship ended up. Let's say I'm just a bit cautious these days. It cast a little pall over the group until they started the confess game. I wasn't familiar. We pull situations out of a hat, and you have to tell a true story about that situation if you've been in it. It's fun, and you don't have to play, and we try not to keep it too personal. The object is to laugh, not embarrass. We usually ask 3 people, then draw another subject. All right. I agreed and they began. The first question: what was the craziest place or situation you had sex in? Everybody looked at me. Gee, there's been so many. Which should I choose? That brought a round of laughter. All right, it was just before I came here to college. I bet you all thought I was a virgin, huh? I'm from a small town. The hot spots for a teenager were the drive-in burger joints, the movies, and the bowling lanes. That was pretty much the nightlife. My friend Joe and I were cruising around in his car, a '67 Barracuda. Man, I would have loved to own that car. It was jet black and had that big bubble back window. Anybody remember those? There was a few nods from the guys. Anyway, Joe and I cruised the bowling alley parking lot and hooked up with 2 girls from the other high school in the county. He had a hot car. I was 18, legal age at the time. So I had a case of beer, and it wasn't long until we were out in the country, riding the back roads. We parked, drank half the case, and pretty soon we were necking like crazy. I had my hands all over her body, and she seemed to like it. Then the cops came by, and we had to leave. Joe was witching, because where he had to stop, me and the girl I was with were getting closer into it then, playing with paradise. She had her hands all over me when Joe stopped. Got a piss. We all needed to go by then. So while the girls were in the bushes, I outlined my grand plan to Joe. Remember, this was a drunk, excited teenager, so the plan had to be simple. That particular model of Barracuda had a neat feature. You could fold the back seat down and make a storage area. I talked Joe into folding it down, then talked my girl out of her clothes. We were gonna screw in the back while he drove around. Brilliant, right? The plan came apart when Joe asked me where he should drive. It don't matter. Man, just don't stop until we're done, then I'll drive. About 10 minutes go by. We're folded like pretzels, but it didn't stop us. Joe's girl had started teasing him with her hand, and it kept him distracted. I felt a hard bump, then another. He needs new shocks, I'm thinking, when all of a sudden I hear people clapping and cheering. I managed to look up, and Joe is cruising through the bowling alley parking lot. We were bouncing over the speed bumps they had installed. I was almost there. No way I was stopping. So I lost it, right there in front of about 20 people. I had rolled off the girl by then. She saw where we were and started screaming, slapping Joe on the back of his head. His girl is just about finished, and when she does, her head pops up and she starts screaming too. We get out of town, them cussing like sailors the whole time, get our clothes on, and take them back. They got into their car, still cussing, one holding their clothes, and burned rubber while everyone cheers again. So there you have it, the most unusual place I ever had sex in. The back of a '67 Barracuda in the bowling alley parking lot, in front of a crowd. I was actually a bit of a legend in my school for a few weeks. Most of them were laughing so hard they had tears in their eyes. I was laughing along until I looked up, right into Sheila's eyes. I stopped laughing instantly. Sabrina saw me and grabbed my hand. Behave, I didn't know she would be here. I sent out a grapevine invitation, and she's still my friend. I smiled. No problem, the past is in the past. I'm content to leave it there. She smiled and turned away, but I could have sworn I heard her mumble, maybe for you. But I couldn't be sure. She didn't approach me for about an hour, but I felt her eyes on me constantly. Soon everyone was watching us instead of partying. Enough was enough. I walked up to her. She had a look in her eye halfway between hope and terror. Hi, Sheila. I like your hair. She had a shorter, more professional cut, much different from the flowing mane she had when we were together. She automatically stroked it. You don't think it makes me look older? I laughed, and everybody else did when they heard me. Duh. Of course it does. The fact that you are older has nothing to do with it. I glanced at her hand. I couldn't help it. No rings. She noticed it and smiled for the first time. She rubbed my face. I could say the same for you. When did you get rid of the beard? And that's the shortest I've ever seen your hair. I had to grow up. Owners aren't comfortable when their managers look like John Lennon. My cheek felt like it was on fire where she touched it. Everybody relaxed and went back to partying. She followed me around, so I stopped trying to ditch her. "You want to talk?" she said out of the blue. "About what?" I said, knowing the answer. "About us. About how bad I screwed up. About letting me apologize for the horrible way I treated you." I sighed. "There is no us anymore, Sheila. You did treat me horribly, and I do accept that you feel bad about it. But I can never trust you again, so let's just try to remember the good times." She tried not to, but tears rolled down her cheeks. She disappeared for a while. I got drunk. Not high, not tipsy, knee-walking drunk. About halfway and I felt someone slip under my arm, and I clung to them blindly. Billy drove me back to the motel. He and a helper got me inside and undressed. "You're on your own from here," I heard him say right before I passed out. The last thing I heard was a woman saying she could handle it. I felt like toasted shit when I woke up later. Somebody shoved 3 aspirins and a full glass of water down my throat before I passed out again. It didn't help much. Man, do I hate hangovers. I finally pried my eyes open and got them to focus. Then I shook my head, thinking I was seeing things. That made it hurt even worse. When I got my head cleared again, I saw the same thing. Sheila, sitting cross-legged on the bed. Naked. What happened? She had a sad look in her eyes. "You tried to drink me away last night. Didn't work. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere until we talk. But first, you need a shower pretty bad. I hope you got enough towels." I watched that great body I remembered so well sway across the room. She looked over her shoulder at me in the door. "You comin'?" Or what? It wasn't what. We didn't do anything. I was in no shape. But we did rediscover each other's body, touching with tenderness. Neither of us bothered dressing, just went back to bed. As my head cleared, we talked. Actually, she talked about her life for the last 2 years. About how sorry she was for what she did to me. How she had gone to some counseling sessions the hospital provided free to staff. It made her realize she was afraid of commitment. To put it in plain terms, I didn't want to grow up. While we were in college, it was like we were safe from the real world. The last year, when we were actually adults, started me retreating. She rubbed my cheek again. "But don't worry. My act of stupidity made me grow up pretty fast, especially since I didn't have you to run home to. I had to put on the big girl clothes and deal with it. And I did. I'm all grown up now, Roy. Please, let me prove it to you." I finally worked enough energy up to eat something. She refused to leave my side. I think she would have stood outside the men's room door if she could, to make sure I didn't slip away. I asked her about 9 what time she had to be home. "When you throw me out." Not a minute before. So she stayed. We made love. It was everything I remembered. Actually, it was better. Maybe she was trying to prove something to us or herself, but it was more intense, more intimate. We didn't get back together right away. It took months, because I wouldn't be rushed. If it had been up to her, we would have married that first weekend. But we did, and 2 years later our son came along. And I lived, for the most part, in happiness and love, until it came apart again. Sheila had moved back into the house by now. She tried through various sources, but didn't find out where I lived until after the divorce. All the paperwork originated and was sent from an address, not mine, of the YCDD Corporation. My entertainment lawyer set it up, and when he had me name it, he asked what the initials meant. Does it matter? No, not really, just wondered. She and her lawyer almost went into shock over the financial disclosures. It included half the profits from the first 2 books to date, as well as half the movie rights. In the end, a major film company outbid everyone else at $1.3 million, with a flyer saying that if the movie grossed over a certain amount, I would get a percentage. It came down to almost $700,000 apiece after taxes, and as a bonus, she got the house and I kept health insurance on her until she was 62. I kept the retirement from my old company, and she kept hers. It was as fair as I can make it. She still fought every step of the way. The arbitrator was about to throw up his hands when she wanted alimony for 10 years. Please, Mrs. Smith, be realistic. The marriage is over. All your tactics are doing is delaying the inevitable. He's been more than fair. If you add in the house, you're getting more than half the assets. He obviously wants you to live in comfort. I had a quick conference with Becky. She was about to disagree but saw the look on my face. All right, she said, coming back into the room, this is it, my client's final offer. She can have all the revenues of the first 2 books for the next 3 years in lieu of any alimony. This is our final offer. Refuse, and we go away, and let arbitration lapse. You can take him to court. I'll make sure to fight you tooth and nail for years over every little item. He's got the deep pockets, you don't? You don't have the money right now to pay your lawyer. His fee is contingent on the settlement. How long do you think he's going to fight for you if his paycheck is years in the future? I hope you fight, now. I have a college education to pay for starting next year. Sheila looked at me, pleading. It had been 9 months, and the pain for both of us was still there. She nodded her head. 45 days later, we were no longer husband and wife. I turned 62 yesterday. I'm officially old. I lay in bed, head slightly aching, really glad I don't drink much anymore, and thought about my life post-marriage. I finally got famous enough people would recognize me. I had written 6 books so far. 3 bestsellers, 2 good ones, and 1 I'm surprised got published. It sold well enough anyway. 2 were made into motion pictures. 1 was turned into a miniseries on television. Money kept rolling in. Kelsey surprised me by enrolling in a state university 30 miles away and living with me for 2 years. She just moved out a few months ago, into an apartment with her boyfriend. I got a housekeeper who complained I didn't dirty enough to keep her busy. He practically lives in that basement office of his, and he won't let me in there except once a week. When Kelsey moved in, she had a lot to do, because there was always a girl or 2 there, just for the night. She actually enjoyed it. 2 weeks before the decree became final, I had my first sexual encounter with someone I hadn't been married to for 32 years. She was a recently divorced woman of 50. She looked good, but I was warned by my friends. We know who you are now, and you have to be making good money off those books. She's looking for a sugar daddy and thinks you're it. I didn't care when she came on to me. I was back in college again. She was good. It was like she was auditioning, eager, willing to do anything. I did my first in quite a while. Her disappointment in me not moving her in a month later was hard for me to bear, but I dealt with it. Luckily, the bar of the country club had a full contingent of cougars, and I slept alone by choice most of the time. There's lots of old fools out there, but I like to think I wasn't one of them. Right now I'm seeing my new neighbor. She's my age and looks much younger. Of course, she told me she was heavily into yoga and had been for 2 years. Her therapist recommended it as a way to center herself, and she fell in love with it. She tries to get me to do it with her, but I like my machines just fine. I have to admit I do admire her flexibility, though. I watched as her house got built across the cove from me. A simple house, compared to the McMansions that had been popping up. A single-story 3-bedroom cottage, with an extensive outdoor living area. When it was almost done, Kelsey took the canoe I kept in the boathouse and paddled over. She had been grinning like mad for the last 3 months, happy over her new boyfriend, I guess. She came back and hugged me. I met our new neighbor. You'd like her. She's divorced, close to your age, but she's got a tight body and a cute face. We should invite her over. I was right in the middle of finishing my last book and was concentrating on that, so I just nodded. I could entertain later. Kelsey shocked me when she said she was tired of watching my platinum parade go by. I needed to find a steady relationship. I kissed her and told I had done that, and it didn't work out so well. The new house was finished and our neighbor moved in. I was out in my pontoon early one morning, working the cove, trying to catch dinner. I saw her on the patio and got out my binoculars. She was on a mat, moving her body through a series of motions that were sensual and slightly erotic, in a skin-tight leotard. I didn't get a look at her face. It was obscured by a mass of silver hair that looked familiar somehow. Maybe I would invite her over some night for dinner. Got a bit of a look at our new neighbor this morning. Maybe we should be nice and invite her to dinner, be neighborly. Kelsey sat and grinned at me. There's no horn dog like an old horn dog. I pretended to be offended. She grinned harder. Tell you what, I'll invite her to your birthday party next week. Meet her in a casual setting. I've already told you I don't want a party. Doesn't matter. The sad fact is when people get old and senile, the youngsters can push them around. Besides, I've already invited people. Just a few. So that Friday afternoon I was out on the patio, mixing with friends and well-wishers. Becky was there with her family. We had remained friends, and her daughter was a fixture at my house, going to the same college as Kelsey. My son and his new wife, my ex-daughter-in-law and her new husband. All I need now is Sheila, I thought sadly. My butcher was there, beaming at the compliments to the meat. We had become golfing buddies. A select few of my country club friends and their wives, about 40 people in all. Shorts, tees, sandals. They were admiring the pool Kelsey made me put in. You didn't really expect me to swim in the lake, did you? Thinking of her, I looked around. She wasn't to be found. I think she took the pontoon to fetch your new neighbor, said Becky, grinning. I hear she has a pretty good body. Probably a dog, I said sourly. You're about to find out. Here they come. I turned and watched as Kelsey led the woman up from the dock. Leggy, thin with good curves. She had a halter and cutoffs on. It was oddly familiar. She was taking her oversized sunglasses off as they reached us. "Gramps," she fussed, "you know how sound carries over water. We heard what you said. You need to apologize." I flushed with embarrassment as I turned. Before I could say anything, she pushed the hair out of her eyes and held out her hand. "Hi," she said. "I'm Sheila Wolf." "Yes, Sheila. My ex live, and in person. You're my new neighbor?" Her smile faltered a bit. Then she continued like we had never met. "Yes, I am. My granddaughter lives up her, and I fell in love with the place. I've been divorced for a couple of years, and I recently retired. My ex had made a little money, and he was more generous than I deserved. I got a good deal on the lot and built the house I always wanted." She hesitated again. "Please, Roy. There was nothing left for me back there. I sold the house. I'm trying to move on with my life. I won't bother you. Won't come over uninvited. Kelsey is here. You're here. I don't want to be far away." I gave up. She acknowledged the compliments on her new look, talking about how much therapy and yoga had helped. 2 of the women I had dated in the past was there, and when introductions were made, they circled each other like mature cats, taking measure. In the end, Sheila smiled. She was more attractive and in much better shape, and they knew it. Becky was laughing her butt off. "Did you know about this?" "No, but Roy, you got to admit, she really looks good." I sighed. She always looked good to me. Didn't stop her from doing what she did twice. Sheila was behind us. She stood, let a tear slide down her cheek, then retreated to the bathroom, repaired her makeup, and came back smiling. We ate. We carried on like the friends we were. Somewhere along the line, she had attached herself to me and didn't leave. Finally, it was just Becky, her husband, her daughter, Kelsey and her boyfriend, me, and Sheila. Our son and Ig's wife were in bed with their spouses, staying the night. "Roy, I'd like to call it an evening. Will you take me home now?" We walked down to the pontoon and took the short ride across the cove without talking. "Will you escort me in? At least to the door, so I can set the security system?" I walked her in. She showed me the place with pride, talking about the features she had incorporated. It was simple and tastefully furnished. I complimented her. "I'm happy here," she said simply. She made coffee. I drank a cup and started for the door. I got almost there when she said in a small voice, "Stay." "Sheila, that isn't a good idea. Please? I won't read anything into it. I know we're done. We'll never be man and wife again. Just for tonight. Consider it a birthday present or comfort for a friend. Please." Well, I know it was tempting and it was free sex, but I refused to go down that road. "That is a very tempting offer, but I guess I will pass," I said and walked away. I heard sobs, but then I was past that anyways. I went back to my place. I do see her occasionally, but I know she still wants me back. You must be thinking, this guy will crack and end up with her soon. Well, don't count on that. I just got 2 Belgian Malinois. So far they are like little T-Rexes, but I know soon they will be 2 loving guard dogs keeping me away from my ex-wife. 2 years later, Sheila now has diabetes, and what my granddaughter has told me, she also has some heart problems. She had left her yoga and workouts after that night. She asked me to stay back. I guess I broke her spirit and heart both. Karma is a reality. I, on the other hand, am still trying to train my dogs to identify and attack my ex-wife. Nah, just kidding. I am still struggling to keep them off my bed. I wake up every morning to kisses and howls. To be honest, as much as I love it, there are days I absolutely hate waking up. But then, the love I get now is undivided, and you know the best part. My dogs don't judge me, and for me they are now my whole life. Till death do us apart. Yes, I am talking about you. Now shut up. The story is over. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.